Hello everyone, welcome to yet another session of the daily news analysis by SRIRAM'S IAS, where we take up the important articles featuring in the Hindu newspaper and break them down for our understanding from the examination point of view. So let's start today's discussion by taking up the important articles featuring in the newspaper, and let's take up the first article for the day. Now the first article which appears in the newspaper reads, Puttaswamy and the fading promise of a right. Now this article appears in the newspaper in the backdrop of the KS Puttaswamy judgment, which is popularly named as the right to privacy judgment. It was announced 5 years ago on August 24th, in which for the first time the Supreme Court, a 9-judge bench of the Supreme Court, and the case is known as Justice KS Puttaswamy versus the Union of India. The Supreme Court unanimously held that Indians have a constitutionally protected fundamental right to privacy that is an intrinsic part of life and liberty under Article 21. Article 21 is the fundamental right which pertains to life and liberty, and this right to privacy was enshrined and was recognized as a fundamental right under this particular article and ambit of the Article 21. So in this backdrop, since it's the 5-year anniversary of the judgment and the recognition of right to privacy, it bodes for us to ask this question: what is the status of implementation and what is the status of the development of right to privacy in India? So the author through this article also tries to trace down what has happened to the development of the right to privacy in India and what are the various issues that exist and the challenges that pertain with respect to implementation of this right to privacy. So from the examination point of view, this becomes important for us from the GS2 perspective. So what we'll be doing, we'll be first understanding what was the right to privacy judgment, what did it exactly held, and then we'll get on to the contemporary issues as to what are the issues, challenges, and what can we do about it. So when the judgment was pronounced in the year 2017, what did it say? Basically, the issue was some petitioners, of which one was the retired Justice KS Puttaswamy. They put up a petition in the Supreme Court asking the Supreme Court to recognize the right to privacy, which means that any individual or group of individuals in the society should have the right to their privacy. Now, privacy can mean various things. Privacy can be bodily privacy, emotional privacy, informational privacy, any area that the individual or the group of individuals think that they do not want to share this with others can be a part of privacy. So the Supreme Court recognized the privacy as a natural right that inheres in all natural persons, and the right may be restricted only by state action that passes each of the 3 tests. So what did Supreme Court do? Much like the other fundamental rights in the Constitution, where they are recognized as natural fundamental rights, but there are certain reasonable restrictions also placed on them where state action can be levied. So the Supreme Court levied 3 parameters or 3 tests to identify whether the state action on this right to privacy would be justified or not. And what is this 3-pronged test? We've discussed this test earlier. First test said that such state action must have a legislative mandate, which means that if in any case the state wants to infringe on the privacy on the individual, or it wants to initiate such kind of an action which might result into a breach of the privacy of the individual or group of individuals. So in order to hold that action legitimate, the first test would be that they should have a legislative backing, which means that the representatives of the country sitting in the parliament should agree that such kind of action is necessary. So that becomes the first step. Then second test is that it must be pursuing a legitimate state purpose. This becomes an obvious second test, wherein the objective of the law or the action that the state wants to initiate should have a legitimate state purpose, which means that it should be important and it should be a very connected to the public interest, the purpose that the state wants to incorporate a law for, that should have a legitimate purpose. So that becomes the second test. Then third is that it must be proportionate. This becomes a very important test, wherein let's say that these 2 conditions are being fulfilled, where there is an act passed and it also pertains to an legitimate action that the state has to pursue. But the real test comes in wherein the kind of restriction or the law that is made has to be proportionate with the action that is sought. That is, such a state action, both in its nature and extent, must be necessary in a democratic society, and the action ought to be the least intrusive of the available alternatives to accomplish the ends. So, with these three tests, by ensuring that there is a backing of the legislature, that the purpose is legitimate, and the extent and nature of the law made is proportionate with respect to the kind of breach of privacy that will happen, the Supreme Court tried to ensure a balance between recognizing the individual's right to privacy and the need for state to take actions which might result into infringing of the privacy of the individuals. So this became the basis of right to privacy, and that is why it became a very landmark judgment. Now what is happening now? So after 5 years of the incorporation of the right to privacy judgment, various developments with respect to data privacy and right to privacy took place, wherein we saw the initiation of the personal data protection bill also started, and recently it was withdrawn as well. So we'll try to understand after 5 years now what has been the extent of the usage and collection of data, and how has the right to privacy judgment impacted in all of this. So first, we want to understand the extent of data collection by government and companies. Why are we looking at this? Because when we try to understand the gravity of right to privacy, or as to in what areas can it percolate into, for that first we need to understand what kind of data and in what ways the government and the companies are collecting the data of the citizens and the residents of the country. So some of the primary sources through which government collects the data, we have enlisted that in front of us. First is the Aadhaar. Now Aadhaar is the biometric identification which every citizen of the country gets. So that Aadhaar becomes primary basis for identification. But we know in the past few years what has been happening is that this service of Aadhaar is being made mandatory, or is being also asked to link with other services. So this increases the possible misuse of Aadhaar, because it can be linked with other services, and there have been many instances wherein the Aadhaar data of the individuals or the citizens of the country has been leaked and has been found with people who were not supposed to have that data. So that misuse has been found out. Then even the corporates have started using Aadhaar for their KYC services, so which means that they are also using the Aadhaar data, and the cases have gone into Supreme Court multiple times for not linking or not making Aadhaar data mandatory for collection of mandatory services, and Supreme Court has held also in the favor of this, but still a lot of authorities still ask for Aadhaar, and the easy availability of the Aadhaar documents of other individuals is still possible. Then there is a Arogya Setu app. This was the app which was launched at the time of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is basically a contact tracing app which was launched specifically for the reason so that when a person gets COVID-19 positive, he or she can enlist on the app, and the other persons can see how many positive people are there in their vicinity. So which means that this app has the ability to track the location of the people, so which means that this app can also send a lot of data to the government. So all this location data, personal information data is going to the government, right? So this is one app which was there. Then there is a app known as AgriStack. This is a repository for farmers which collects information about the farmers. Similar is the eShram portal. We keep looking about this. The eShram portal is again the database for collecting information about the unorganized laborers. Then there is also the Ayushman Bharat Digital Health Mission. Through this, the government collects the information about the health parameters of the residents and citizens of the country. Then there is the National Digital Education Architecture, which takes data about the teachers and students of the country. So what I want to show from all of these services is that how extensive is the mechanism of the government to collect data from the citizens, and how there can be potential instances of misuse of this data, and therefore a robust mechanism for holding the government accountable and there being in place a robust system of laws and a safety mechanism and a mechanism for how the data is being used is very important. So, how is there a potential misuse of this data? So, there is an interesting example wherein, so one can argue that all the data that is collected by government through these services are for important purposes. Like the eShram portal data is being collected for the welfare of the unorganized workers. For the AgriStack collects data for the welfare of the farmers. Arogya Setu app was launched so that the citizens stay safe. So all of this do have a positive connotation or a positive intention. But the problem area arises when the misuse of this data can happen, and this is what we need to stop. So let's take an example of how one time this was misused or reports of the misuse of this data came up. So what happened was, vehicular data is collected via the Vahan and Sarthi databases. These are those databases which have data with respect to the customers' vehicle numbers and their vehicle details. So these databases collect the data and it belongs with the government. But this data was licensed for rupees 3 crore annually, and it was licensed to the private enterprises, and the policy was withdrawn only after reports emerged that the data was used in a communal riot to identify person by religion based on vehicles parked at their houses. Now this particular instance can show us the dangerous aspect of the misuse of the data, where in the first place these databases were there to collect vehicular information, but some nefarious perpetrators also used this data for purposes of communal riot, where on the basis of their religion people's car could be pointed out and maybe they could be damaged. So this shows us the grievous danger of potential misuse of this data. That is why we need to be very vigilant as to how our data is being collected and how the privacy of the individuals and the proper use of that data is ensured. Similarly, even the IRCTC, or the corporation which runs the railways in India, invited bids to explore how train reservation data, including possible personal details of passengers, can be monetized. So these are instances which shows that government has indulged into selling of this data or leasing of this data to other enterprises as well. So this is some of the instances where we see that the data can be misused. Now, from these instances, let's now come to the challenges that are faced with the implementation of the right to privacy. As we saw right now, that the law came 5 years ago and it recognized the right to privacy. But there are several challenges as of now which impede its implementation. First is obviously that after the initiation of the data protection bill, it has been now withdrawn, and that is why all the issues that we are talking about as to the extensive collection and usage of data needs to be regulated, needs to be held government accountable for. That is not happening, and that is why the withdrawal of the protection bill is a big challenge, and a robust law framework with respect to protection of data and data security needs to be brought in place very quickly. Then the other challenges that is happening is that the exiting of VPN services out of India. This is also a challenge that is emerging, which is becoming a conflict between the government and the VPN providers. VPN, or virtual protection network, are those services which help you to mask your internet protocol address or IP address of your computer and lets you surf the internet or do activity on the digital world without getting tracked or without having your activity traced by other authorities. So since the government has asked these VPNs to store a data for a period of 5 years in India, these VPN providers have disagreed with government provisions and they are in conflict with them, and that is why a lot of VPN providers are exiting India. So that has come up as a challenge. Then the primary challenge which exists in this debate is always about national security versus privacy. This is what the government also always debates on, that is that we are compromising on privacy because the issue of national security is of utmost importance. This is always the debate that goes on. So, and what has government done on this regard? The government has continued to commission and execute mass surveillance programs with little regard for necessity or proportionality, with justifications always voiced in terms of broad national security talking points. We have discussed in earlier discussions as to how the provisions of the IT Act or the Indian Telegraph Act have vague provisions which give blanket powers to the government to take any actions in the pretext of national security, and therefore there is a need to specify these provisions and make a balance between ensuring national security as well and privacy of the individuals as well. The action that government took with respect to breaching privacy, or one can say the extreme action that the government took, was the Ministry of Home Affairs in December 2018 authorized 10 central agencies to intercept, monitor and decrypt any information generated, transmitted, received or stored in any computer in the country. Now again, this is a visible form of blanket power given to the law enforcement agencies. One can argue that this is done for a good purpose, with the purpose of tracking down criminals, but there also needs to be a curb on the discretion of these agencies. So therefore, with respect to the challenge of national security and privacy, the bottom line always is that it should not be national security versus privacy. It should be a balance between national security and privacy. The second challenge, which we saw through the previous examples of data collection, is that about data use and data privacy, wherein the government collects data through legitimate sources, saying that the intention is to use the data for the benefit of the citizens, but it infringes with the privacy of the individuals. This is what the debate runs about, and we saw through the previous examples of all the apps and portals that the government has, which has the good intention of using the data for good purposes, but it should not result into breaching of the privacy of the individuals. Right? Now, what is the way forward in this? When we looked at the issue that 5 years have gone by and this judgment of right to privacy having come and yet not being implemented properly, the data protection bill having been withdrawn, and several instances of government collection of data has extensively increased. So in the absence of a robust framework to check the government's action and to keep it accountable is the need of the hour to do, and therefore a rights-oriented data protection legislation is the need of the hour, which includes comprehensive surveillance reform, prohibiting mass surveillance, and institution of a judicial oversight mechanism for targeted surveillance. So which means that judicial oversight or oversight of the judiciary should be there in such actions of the government. So yesterday, like the Pegasus judgment came in, which has recognized that the existence of Pegasus malware was present in all the suspected phones or not, it is not sure. And only 5 such phones can be said that were infected by some kind of a malware, and that is also not sure whether they were Pegasus infected or not. With this, at the same time, the Supreme Court has also observed that the central agencies or the central government were not very cooperative with dealing with this issue. So it has certainly shown some light on the Pegasus issue, but the dangers of mass surveillance and the possibilities of it still remain. So, and for the privacy judgment to fulfill its true promise, it needs to go beyond spirited dissents to firm, binding judgments that keep the political executive within clear, limited constitutional boundaries. This is the essence of the conclusion, wherein in order to go forward in a world where data is the new oil and data is going to rule our lives, and everything that we do is accessible to the government, is accessible to the companies, there is a stringent need for bringing in a law that protects the privacy and secures the data of the citizens, right? So this was the discussion with respect to right to privacy on the occasion of completion of 5 years of the judgment. With this, let's move on to our next article. The next article which appears in the newspaper reads, Supreme Court raises Karnataka iron ore mining ceiling limit. Now, this article pertains to the Supreme Court order wherein it has increased the ceiling, which means that the quantity of iron ore that could be mined from the mines of Karnataka has been increased by the Supreme Court. So in this aspect, what becomes important for us from the examination point of view is to study about iron ore and the various iron ore mines that exist in Karnataka and otherwise. So let's take a look at that. What is the article saying first of all? It has raised the ceiling limit of iron ore mining, which was 28 million metric ton. MMT is million metric ton. From 28, it has increased to 35 million metric ton for Bellary district. This is a district in state of Karnataka, and from 7 metric ton to 15 metric ton for Chitradurg and Tumakuru districts. These are other districts in the Karnataka state. And what explanation has the Supreme Court given for increasing this ceiling limit? It is said that conservation of the ecology and environment must go hand in hand with the spirit of economic development. The Supreme Court has wanted to balance both principles of conserving the ecology and environment and also balancing the economic development objectives. Both should go hand in hand, and therefore a fine balance between the two goals is what is sought to be achieved even now, said a bench headed by Chief Justice N.V. Ramanna, which was also the last day for the Chief Justice in his office. So this is what the explanation is given. Now let's come to the topic at hand. What do we mean by iron ore? Now iron ore, as we all know, what is ore? Iron ores are rocks and minerals from which the metallic iron can be extracted. So iron ore is extracted and it is converted into usable iron, and then we see that the universal use of iron we see getting applied in nearly every activities, and therefore India also has a large iron ore reserves. Now talking about iron ore, there are different types of iron ores. There are 3 types. One is the magnetite, other is hematite, and third is the limatite, of which these are classified based on their presence of iron content. So magnetite has the highest iron content, very high content of iron, up to 70%. That is why it is known as the finest iron ore, and it has excellent magnetic qualities, especially valuable in the electrical industry. So magnetite becomes the finest ore. The second quality ore is the hematite iron ore, which is again most important industrial iron ore in terms of quantity used, but has a slightly lower iron content. So 60% to 70% is what iron content is contained by the hematite ore. And the third type, which is of the lower grade, is which contains up to 30 to 40% metallic iron in it, and it's mostly yellow in color, and it's low grade iron ore. So these are the 3 major types of the iron ore that exist based on their presence of iron content in them. And the highest producer of this iron content in India is the Odisha-Jharkhand belt, the Durg-Bastar-Chandrapur belt, which spans across Chhattisgarh and Maharashtra, and then the Bellary-Chitradurg and Chikmagalur-Tumkur belt. This is the Karnataka region, and the Maharashtra and Goa belt also has presence of iron ore mines. So if we take up the extent of presence of iron ore in the country, these states account for 95% of the total iron ore that exists in the country. These belts, these states of Maharashtra, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Chhattisgarh, Odisha and Jharkhand. So let's take a look at the major mines that exist in these states. So the major mines that exist in these states, the article is talking about Bellary district mines. There is the Chitradurg and again Tumkur district mines over here. Karnataka also has the Chikmagaluru. Then we have different mines in Andhra Pradesh, Telangana. We have in Chhattisgarh, Bailadila. Then we have in Jharkhand, we have Sindhudurg. Then we have in Odisha, Keoujhar, Mayurbhanj, Barbel, Sundargarh. These become the major iron ore mines which are spanned in these states. So this becomes important for us. These locations of the iron ore mines become important for us from the perspective of examination. Now we finished this article over here, and with this let's move on to our next article for the day. Now the next article which appears in the newspaper reads, Government e-Marketplace, also known as GEM, eyes procurement of 2 lakh crore in the financial year 2023, says the CEO of GEM, Mr. Singh. Now this article becomes important because the government e-marketplace is an important concept and it becomes important for us from the point of view of GS3. So what is this GEM portal or government e-marketplace? So the government e-marketplace is basically a portal, the government e-marketplace portal, especially set up by the government. This is a screenshot of the website. So which is basically set up for procurement of various products and services by the central and state agencies. So the central and state governments and agencies require the services of a lot of products and other activities now, and they have to go to the, instead of going to the market to procure these services, government has instituted a separate place itself, a marketplace itself for doing that, and that is known as the government e-marketplace. And it has finally reached a successful point wherein the article now is saying that 2 lakh procurement to all the goods and services amounting to rupees 2 lakh crore will now be procured by this portal, and which means that products and services worth rupees 2 lakh crore would be available for buying for all the people, especially the government services, because it is mandatory for the state and central agencies to procure all their services from the government e-marketplace portal. So in this aspect, let's look at what is the government e-marketplace. It's an online platform for public procurement in India by various government departments, organizations and PSUs. So all the government agencies are supposed to procure their goods and services from this GEM portal. It was launched on August 9, 2016 by the Ministry of Commerce and Industry with the objective to create an open and transparent procurement platform for government buyers. So it functions under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, and it is owned and run by a GEM SPV or a special purpose vehicle, which is a 100% government owned non-profit company under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. So the ownership and administration is done by this special purpose vehicle, and it aims to enhance transparency, efficiency and speed in public procurement. So what kind of services or products are offered in this GEM? Nearly every kind of products or services that can be used by these government departments, organizations and PSUs, be that everyday activity products, food grains, all other important products, these are all available in the GEM portal. And the mechanism through which this portal operates is that it provides the tools of e-bidding, reverse e-auction and demand aggregation to facilitate the government users achieve the best value for their money. So the bidding process of all the products also takes place on this portal, and the purchases through GEM by government users have been authorized and made mandatory by the Ministry of Finance. So as I said, the central and state government agencies and other organizations have been made mandatory to purchase their procurements from this portal, and therefore for the financial year 2023, the government e-marketplace is eyeing for a procurement worth rupees 2 lakh crore, which is a record, because up until now this high worth procurement was not happening, and it's the first time this is happening. So what can be the benefit of this GEM marketplace for the buyers? This offers rich listing of products for individual categories of goods and services. So buyers get the lucrative offers to buy from it, and it therefore makes available search, compare and select and buy facility. Then it enables buying goods and services online as and when required. So apart from a private alternative that exists for such buying, this is the government alternative which exists for buying of goods and services, and it provides transparency and ease of buying. So more than for the general public, what it does is it ensures that whatever government agencies are procuring from the earlier they were doing from the market, now they can do it from the GEM portal. It will ensure that there is transparency in their procurement, and whatever things they are buying, it is visible and it can be kept a track record for what they are buying, and therefore it provides transparency, and then it ensures continuous vendor rating system as well, and it has up-to-date user-friendly dashboard for buying, monitoring, supplies and payments, and it also has a provision for easy return policy. So these become the advantages of the portal for the buyers that come to the portal to procure their services, buy their services and products. And what are the advantage for sellers? The advantage for sellers is that they get direct access to all government departments. This becomes the first lucrative point for the sellers, where they can directly sell their products and they can get the direct access to the government departments. And it's a one-stop shop for marketing with minimal efforts. This is what every seller wants, that his or her product is visible to everyone, and this can be done with minimal efforts on this platform. And it's a one-stop shop for bids, reverse auction on products and services as well, as we saw. Then the new product suggestion facility is available to the sellers as well, and a dynamic pricing system, which means that prices can be changed based on market conditions, is also a provision that has been kept in the portal. And the seller-friendly dashboard for selling and monitoring of supplies and payments has also been kept to facilitate the seller's services. And consistent and uniform purchase procedures have been kept so that the process of the selling of products and services on this portal can be streamlined. So these are the background information with respect to the government e-marketplace, and which become important for us from the examination point of view. So with this, let's move on to our next article for the day. The next article which appears in the newspaper reads, Center picks 75 tribal districts for TB or tuberculosis intervention project. Now, this is an article appearing in the newspaper which talks about the tuberculosis disease. The tuberculosis as a disease, as we keep hearing, is a very significantly lethal or damaging disease for India especially. So it becomes important for us to study from the general science point of view, which becomes important in the prelims and features in the GS3 perspective as well. Right? So what is the government doing in this article? The government has basically, after an active case finding campaign to detect instances of TB among tribal population, so the government has intensified its efforts to identify extent of TB prevalence in the tribal populations, and after excuse me, after an exercise of 6 months, the Ministry of Tribal Affairs and the Central TB Division of the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, these bodies have now zeroed in on 75 tribal districts which will be focused, which will face focused interventions will be run over the next few months with the aim to make them TB free. This is the crux of the article, wherein these two divisions, Ministry of Tribal Affairs and the Central TB Division of the Ministry of Family Health and Welfare, will implement TB intervention, awareness and eradication program in 75 tribal districts which have high prevalence of TB in the tribal population. So this is the news with respect to the article. Now let's come to what is TB. When we talk about tuberculosis, what exactly is TB? It's an infectious disease caused by a Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So it's a bacterial disease. What we come to know is tuberculosis is a bacterial disease caused by the Mycobacterium tuberculosis. And where does it affect? So TB commonly affects the lungs, and when it affects the lungs, it is known as pulmonary TB, but can also affect other parts, which is known as extrapulmonary TB. So these are the two types of TB, and generally TB affects the lungs of the individual. So in active tuberculosis infection, person may experience chronic cough with blood containing mucus. So this becomes the primary symptom for tuberculosis, where there is incessant cough, where blood containing mucus also comes out for the person, and basically the lungs of the person has infected by this bacteria which causes TB. So the lungs of the person has the Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and this is where we say that the person is infected with TB. Now, what are some of the facts related to TB with respect to India and the world? Worldwide, TB has surpassed HIV/AIDS as the leading cause of death due to infectious diseases. So as I said, therefore TB is a very lethal disease, and especially for India, because India contributes to up to 27% of the global TB burden. So of the total deaths that are happening, or the total cases of TB that are happening in the world, India is home to 27% of those cases, the highest share that is there globally. That is why TB is a big problem in India. And as per WHO, an estimated 4 lakh people have MDR TB, and nearly 37,500 people have XDR TB. Now what are these new variants? We knew TB. What is MDR TB or XDR TB? So MDR TB is known as multi-drug resistant TB. What is known as multi-drug resistant? So what happens with respect to TB treatment is that the bacteria is causing the disease, but at a time when medicines are supplied for this disease, and let's say in some circumstances if the if the medicine dosage is not completely taken, or due to other circumstances, the bacteria develops resistance for these drugs and it becomes even more potent, and the TB becomes even more harder to eradicate and a lethal cause for death. This kind of TB becomes, then the WHO has termed it multi-drug resistant TB or MDR TB, which is again a severe form of TB. Then what is XDR TB? It is again a one step further than MDR, where the bacteria is getting drug resistant, TB drug resistant. When it gets even more drug resistant, it is known as extra drug resistant TB. That is why the name XDR. So these are the more severe forms of tuberculosis which exist primarily because this bacteria, which we saw, Mycobacterium tuberculosis, develops resistance to the drugs that are supplied for the eradication of the disease. And out of this, India has 24% of the MDR TB cases in the world. So India even has high prevalence of the MDR TB cases. And worldwide, TB has surpassed as the leading cause of death due to infectious diseases. This we saw. And India contributes, we saw this information. Then, what has India done to combat the menace of TB? India instituted the National TB Elimination Program, and it started, the process of combating TB started way back in 1962, wherein first time the National TB Program was launched by the government with BCG vaccination. This is the vaccine which exists for tuberculosis. This vaccine was started to be given at district level under the National TB Program, and in 1993 WHO declared TB as a global emergency and devised directly observed treatment. This is the treatment for TB which is known as DOTS, directly observed treatment, and this is the treatment that is given to the TB patients. And in 1993, government revitalized its National TB Program and as the revised National TB Control Program or RNTCP. And in 1997, DOTS was launched as the RNTCP strategy, which means that under the Indian interventions, DOTS treatment or medicines were started to be given. And by 2006, the entire country was covered under this RNTCP program or the National TB Control Program. And then a large number of MDR TB cases also started to surface up every year. And to address this, the strategy was again modified, and the National Strategic Plan for Tuberculosis Control 2012 to 17 was documented with the goal of universal access to quality TB diagnosis and treatment. And even after the extent of MDR TB was not able to, a lot of work was done under this plan from 2012 to 17, but when the prevalence of TB was still there, significant interventions were taken during the National NCP 2012-17 in terms of mandatory notification of all TB cases. So a lot of work was done, integration of the program with the National Health Mission and everything. And after that, for the year 2017 to 25, with the goal of eliminating TB in India by 2025, the National Strategic Plan for Tuberculosis Elimination 2017 to 2025 involving all the stakeholders were formulated by the RNTCP or the National Tuberculosis Control Program, and it was renamed as the National TB Elimination Program. So this is the name of the mission that is going on for TB elimination, National TB Elimination Program. And the National Strategic Plan for the Tuberculosis Elimination 2017 to 25 was launched under this. And what are the principles followed under this plan? It has a 4 strategic pillars of detect, treat, prevent and build. What does this mean? All strategies are to be developed keeping in mind first detecting the cases of TB, treating them with the effective treatment and taking steps to prevent TB so that the prevalence is decreased, and to build infrastructure and services which are important to take care of all these services with respect to diagnosis and treatment of TB. So that is the discussion with respect to this article. We come to the end of today's discussion and we'll meet again tomorrow with the important articles from the newspaper. Thank you.